Southern Mesopotamia in the 4th millennium BCE was a mud-built reality, a landscape of baked earth and silt shaped by the floods of the Tigris and Euphrates. Uruk possessed immense agricultural wealth in the form of grain, but the alluvial plain was entirely devoid of structural resources. The city lacked timber, workable stone, and metal ores. Every monument in the city was a product of this deficit. Architects stacked millions of sun-dried mud bricks to create massive temples, resulting in structures that required constant maintenance against erosion. Maintaining a complex urban state required Uruk to reach hundreds of miles into the Zagros Mountains and Anatolia. These vectors represent the reach of its extraction network. High-density timber was a primary target, specifically the massive cedar forests of Lebanon and the Zagros Range. These cedars provided the structural integrity needed for Uruk's temple architecture, supporting spans and weight that mud brick alone could not manage. Uruk functioned as a corporate monopoly. It was forced into aggressive, high-stakes resource extraction simply to survive its own geographical limitations. Moving heavy raw materials across hundreds of miles of arid terrain created significant logistical friction. Caravans faced constant threats while transporting high-value weight. The city specifically targeted raw copper ore for its workshops and lapis lazuli to signal elite status through jewelry and religious objects. These materials arrived in a raw, unrefined state. The jagged chunks of lapis lazuli represent the starting point for Uruk's specialized artisanal economy. Relying on local middlemen to supply these assets introduced an unacceptable level of risk. Any disruption at the periphery could cause a cascading economic failure back in the city. To mitigate this, Uruk began a state-driven corporate expansion. The goal was to bypass intermediaries and seize direct control of the entire supply chain. Bulk transport relied on specialized river vessels, such as the coracle, to move heavy cargo down the river networks toward the central warehouses. To guarantee this flow remained unbroken, Uruk projected its architectural and military presence far beyond the southern plains, establishing a permanent colonial infrastructure. Uruk's reach extended deep into the Syrian desert, where the state began building a series of dedicated colonial outposts. These settlements were strictly planned geometric grids, designed for centralized control. Every street and structure was engineered from the start to serve an administrative function. The archaeological evidence reveals massive perimeter walls and cramped internal quarters, suggesting a defensive, monopolistic presence rather than a domestic village. This was a system of asymmetrical resource extraction. Uruk established these nodes to funnel wealth out of the periphery and back to the temple bureaucracy. The institutional footprint of the state remains visible in the excavated ruins. Specialized architectural details and carvings in these remote outposts demonstrate a high-status institutional presence, intended to project Uruk's authority in frontier extraction zones. The administrators managing these outposts enforced standardized weights and measures, ensuring that the central temple received precisely what it was owed. These nodes were engineered for a single purpose: the secure transfer of peripheral wealth back to the southern heartland. At its height, an absolutely staggering volume of bulk goods moved down the Euphrates River toward Uruk simultaneously. This volume created significant security vulnerabilities. Shipments were exposed to the threat of theft, skimming, and forgery by both local raiders and corrupt officials within the system. A severe bureaucratic bottleneck existed at the central temple receiving docks. Officials had to process and authenticate massive quantities of incoming goods. The central temple had to verify that shipments arriving from hundreds of miles away were authorized by their designated frontier administrator. The rudimentary stamp seals of the previous era were too small to bridge this gap. They lacked the surface area to carry complex identifying information. Uruk's multi-agency bureaucracy required significantly more verification data, including the name of the agency, the title of the individual, and the specific office of origin. The state required a portable technology capable of carrying dense, unforgeable bureaucratic data across great distances. The high-risk nature of the colonial supply chain necessitated a durable authentication method to verify transactions and prevent administrative fraud. The cylinder seal, or kishib, functioned as an advanced authentication system. It was a sophisticated security tool designed to protect the integrity of state data. Manufacturing a seal was an exercise in extreme physical friction. Seal cutters used copper bow drills and abrasives to grind intricate patterns into semi-precious stone cylinders. This was the Intaglio process. The artist had to carve the image in reverse beneath the stone's surface, creating a negative space that would later produce a positive relief. The carver had to invert positive and negative space in their mind. Because the seal was small, even a fractional error in this reverse carving would distort the final impression, rendering the authentication attempt invalid. The seal cutter, or burgle, was a highly specialized professional. Their expertise acted as a structural barrier to forgery. Very few people possessed the skill to replicate an official signature. In practice, the application was consistent. When rolled across moist clay, the cylinder left a continuous, high-fidelity relief image that was immediately recognizable. The difficulty of manufacturing the seal compared to the ease of its application made it a practical security tool. It provided a clear, repeatable method to secure surfaces against tampering. A standard Uruk-style seal impression carried a high density of bureaucratic data designed to be read by the central administration. This impression shows figures among stylized pine trees. These motifs weren't decorative. Their specific arrangement provided unique identifiers for different agencies. The cylinder's large surface area allowed far more detail than a stamp seal, recording an individual's name, title, and position. The clay impression carried absolute legal weight. In Mesopotamia, breaking an authorized seal was a severe federal crime, as it represented a direct violation of state authority. A lost seal required immediate administrative action. Owners had to record the date and time of loss with officials to ensure that any subsequent transactions made with the seal were legally void. This physical process secured the state's central reserves. Ropes were bound over doors, wet clay was applied to the knots, and the administrator rolled their seal across the surface to certify the contents. This technology allowed a centralized bureaucracy to trust the integrity of data and resources arriving from hundreds of miles away. The cylinder seal provided the technical foundation for a secure, inter-regional extraction network, authenticating the supply chains that built the first urban states.